I'm Jennifer Adams-Massmann, and I'm from the Convocation of Episcopal Churches in Europe, and I'm a 2017 ECF Fellow. So I'm working on a doctoral project with the University of Heidelberg, and it's about the first generation of women missionaries. They came from the Moravian church, and they were working in America, in early colonial America, going out to other German immigrants and also to native peoples. So it's a study of women's leadership and women in ministry in a very early time period that's basically almost unknown, which makes it a very exciting project to look at. For me, I was completely unaware before I began that there had been women who had these roles already 250 years ago. The first foreign Protestant missionaries didn't go out until the 19th century, and these women were really several generations ahead of them. And doing incredible work, I think in part because they were lay women, many of them at first, some of them then were ordained later on, didn't have theological training, and yet they became global missionaries. They would travel all over the Atlantic world, from Europe to South America to Africa, had incredibly mobile lives for women of their time. They were literate, they were teaching, they were preaching, they were leading ministries. And I think for many people to see that we have precedents early on in church history, and to kind of find, for me, what I call the foremothers, not just the forefathers, but the foremothers, and to see these women living incredibly exciting lives, also challenging lives. Many of them were women who were parents, they were mothers, so they were also facing challenges. How do I raise a family and have a career? And I think we tend to think that women would not have had these kinds of questions and challenges in their lives. The Moravian Church made it possible because they had a kind of daycare system, in fact, which allowed women to have full-time 30-year ministries. So I think that's very interesting and exciting. And also, these women were stepping outside of their cultures. Many of them were immigrants from Europe to America, and then they were working with Native American women. And so they were also learning what it means to have intercultural relationships and friendships, and to build networks and create structures in which women can experience faith and grow in faith, and really taking on leadership roles in that capacity. And so I think that's also very exciting to think. Also, just do women do ministry differently? And that's one of the questions that I would like to also ask today. Do women have different spiritual needs? Do women do ministry and mission in different ways? And I think looking at this case study is a way of thinking about that very deeply. I think in some ways it's tricky to make the connections to the colonial period at first, but I think the more we look at another time period, I think it's actually incredibly creative for us. So I find the opportunity to think about women's ministry 250 years ago actually reflects quite a lot, especially on women today and the challenges that women face in churches. I think in the Episcopal Church there's certainly much more acceptance than there was maybe 30 years ago, but there continue to be a lot of challenges to women's leadership. And so I think the opportunity to look and see women were being ordained in the 1750s, women were ordaining other women in the 1750s, and also engaging in lots of cross-cultural ministries. I think it's actually very fruitful and creative to think about ministry today and mission. At least that's my hope, that those connections can then be made and drawn out. Receiving the award, first of all, was very encouraging to me. I think seeing outside interest in the project and the interest of the larger church in what I'm doing was very exciting. And certainly also the financial support of the fellowship is going to allow me to complete the writing process in particular, and actually see the dissertation through to the end, which I think is always important when you're at this point, and seeing that there's interest, and also that after the project is finished and as I'm working on it, that there are also opportunities to share the work. And I think that's something that the fellowship is really unique in doing, and allowing scholars to really creatively think about how I can share this work with other people, and that there's interest out there. So I think that's been a really big boost to me. I hope very much that the Episcopal Church will be, and I think it is, but I hope it will remain and become even more so, a church that's really grounded in its understanding of tradition, and tradition being something that is dynamic and innovative. I feel like, especially when you look at church history and understand where you've come from and understand the challenges that people have had in the past and how they have approached that, I hope that that will help the church to think today about the challenges that it faces in new ways. Before I began studying church history, I tended to be most interested in theology and was very kind of concerned about the contemporary period. And at first it was kind of a challenge to do church history because it didn't feel so directly relevant. But I've discovered that, and this is why I think it's so important for the church, that the more we do understand all the complexities of the past, rather than having a very simplistic or nostalgic understanding of the past, we can appreciate that they didn't know what they were doing either, oftentimes, that they were developing as they went and seeking to listen to the Spirit and see how they were to live faithfully. And I actually find that very inspiring for today. I guess I think about it as being like jazz musicians who have to know the music so deeply and kind of study the greats and study the classics and learn how musicians and composers have done it before in order to improvise. And so I think of church history as kind of practicing in a sense so that we can improvise in our own time period, that we kind of have ideas how people have dealt with challenges in the past, sometimes failed, and that also helps us then to be much more creative and kind of grounded at the same time and be able to go out and do ministry today.